Good evening. The sunset is a disclosure of darkness. The sunset is a disclosure of stars and planets. It is a disclosure of the world's life when it lives at night. The nocturnal animals, as well as the flames, wisps, and orbs. And yet sunset itself is only the first sign, and occurs till the last moment that the sun is visible. Once the disk hides deep enough, the sky says, all is fully revealed, as surely as every saucer hides what is behind it, except for transparent ones, of course. The saucer called the sun hides the whole sky in a veil of blue. You used to just be able to step outside and wait for the sunset and the last light to disappear in the west. But now you have to go to the country because people put lights up everywhere. This makes a different sort of veil, a yellow veil in the night. If there really are unexplained objects in the night sky, people living in the city wouldn't even be able to see them most of the time because of the yellow veil. Is lavender the best? Does Lou Elizondo actually have any relevance at all? What more do I have to say about prairie lights at the moment? Not a whole lot, honestly, but it definitely looks like an interesting avenue of study. Plus, weird weather, but it's because of the climate crisis. All this and more tonight. I'm Rachel Nelson.
I'm Jeff Knox.
Tonight, Louise couldn't make it, unfortunately, but in any case,
we're here.
We are here. Yes. Thank you, Jeff. Welcome. And welcome to Ufos Chat, everyone, a chat show about our regular show, Ufo Sunset. And now for the rebrief. Petrels will chase cyclones, according to a new study. On Tuesday, a new study was published in the journal Current Biology that documents petrels purposefully following cyclones. Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, or WHOI, reported on the paper the same day. The Desertas petrel, Pterodroma deserta, is a seabird with a breeding population of around 200 pairs that nest on Bugio Island, an island of Portugal that sits off the western coast of North Africa. The petrels go on long journeys to forage, crossing the Atlantic Ocean. This new study finds that many petrels will actually chase storms. The wake of a storm provides favorable winds for them to follow, and the storms churn up food for the birds to feed on. Quote, as we've now discovered, Desertas petrels follow hurricanes where prey have accumulated closer to the surface in the wakes of storms, unquote, said Caroline Umenhofer, an associate scientist of physical oceanography at the WHOI and one of the paper's authors. Quote, initial studies suggested that seabirds either circumnavigate cyclones or seek refuge in the calm eye of the storm. However, the Desertas petrels we tracked did neither. Instead, 1/3 of them followed the cyclone for days, covering thousands of kilometers. When we saw the data, we nearly fell off our chairs. This is the first time we have observed this behavior, unquote, said lead author and a postdoc investigator in biology at WHOI,
Francesco
Ventura. The Earth's weather is getting weirder due to climate change. There have been several items published this week specifically concerned with the weather becoming weirder due to climate change. In a piece published today on space.com, contributor Daisy Dobrievic interviewed climate scientist Catherine Cahoe. Because the global average temperature is rising, this means that heat waves are increasing in their intensity, there's increased storm activity, and there's a greater frequency and intensity of thunderstorms and lightning, as well as an increase in wildfires. Heiho is quoted as saying, quote, "Each of us, wherever we live, are experiencing the impacts of climate change today," unquote. Another article on this quote-unquote global weirding of weather was published on Thursday in Salon. In it, a climatologist and deputy lead scientist at the NASA Snow and Ice Data Center, Dr. Twila Moon, was quoted as saying, quote, "Along with this warming, we see increases in deadly heat waves and droughts, but also an increased experience of global weirding," unquote. She described global weirding as, quote, "more extreme weather events producing conditions that are entirely new for communities, weather whiplash as folks may experience quick swings between hot and cold, or drought and flood, and many challenges for crops, wildlife, recreation, and being able to plan for what we previously considered normal weather conditions," unquote. This image by Cranston Herald contributor Pam Schiff documents some of the damage from a microburst that happened on June 26th in Cranston, Rhode Island. The localized storm reportedly affected, quote, "a tiny part of the neighborhood on Marin and Beckwith Streets," unquote, according to Schiff. A giant dust devil was shot on video in Rapid City, South Dakota. On Wednesday, a tall and broad dust devil was caught on video near a parking lot in Medards in Rapid City. This is in the Black Hills region of South Dakota. The video was shot by Jocelyn Jensen and reported by KNBN News Center 1, a TV station serving the Black Hills. From the article by Trevin Dowling and Brant Beckman, quote, "The temperature differential between the relatively cool grass and the hot asphalt of the Menards parking lot likely contributed to the creation of the dust devil seen on Wednesday," unquote.
It's a pretty cool dust devil.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
It should have been on fire, though. Fire tornadoes are better.
Fire spout.
Fire spouts.
They're definitely cooler looking.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Probably not too fun to be around. Not the best company at a party.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of smaller dust devils before, like just in Eastern Oregon and driving through places like, New Mexico.
You're having a little trouble, or maybe I'm having trouble. I'm not sure, but you keep
Am I having trouble, or are you having trouble?
I don't know, but yeah, I think that it was probably on your end, but you were cutting out quite a bit. But
weird.
You seem to be doing fine now, though.
Okay. Well, I will try and go ahead and give my update now then. Hopefully I don't cut out.
Okay, cool.
Sounds good. All right. We'll do this here. Hello, everyone. I'm going to be re-recording my Valensole update presentation today. We tried to do it on our regular discussion episode last Sunday on the 14th, but I believe I was having internet issues and I kept cutting out. And so my audio kept dropping. And so we're going to do this again, just so you guys can hear everything I said. Hopefully I remember everything that I ran through. But let's go ahead and give this Valensole update here. I also I want to apologize before the beginning of my presentations. I kind of give a disclaimer, apologizing for any kind of names and place locations that I may mispronounce. And despite knowing how to pronounce Amy Michelle's last name, I consistently mispronounced it wrong through my Valensole presentation. I kept pronouncing it Mikhail, instead of Michelle. So I apologize for that. That's one minor error that I wanted to get out of the way there. One of the main things that I kind of glimmered or glanced over with my Valensole presentation was the actual direct location of the sighting. And if you recall, I showed this map, and this is a map that was sketched by the gendarmerie a day or a couple of days after the event happened, that showed the location. And the problem is it's kind of hard to locate exactly where this happened based on this kind of map and sketch, because these roads don't really exist anymore. For example, this S kind of shape, kind of curve that you see there, and this Kimen di Taze road is not really there anymore. And in my presentation, I had pointed out that they had built a historical landmark at the location, but I wasn't sure it was actually that near the location. It turns out that that landmark is actually much closer to the location than I had thought. And I want to thank Michael Valant from UP Czech for sending me over a Google KMZ file with some aerial photography images and from 2 years after the event, that I was able to basically figure out exactly where this was. So if we look on a modern kind of Google Earth satellite image, you'll see there's this waypoint here, Valensole's ET. I don't think that waypoint's even actually in the accurate place. I think it's closer down to that intersection of D6 and Kim de Marganel. But you don't see that S-shaped curved road that you see in that kind of sketch, and it was kind of hard to figure out exactly where things are. I knew it was near an abandoned building, and in fact, it's maybe kind of hard to see on here, but there were 3 kind of abandoned structures around where that Valensole ET waypoint was, and I had thought it was maybe one of them, kind of in the upper top right here, or to the southwest of that waypoint. Turns out I was completely wrong. The house is actually the more prominent dark shape, kind of on D6A there, kind of in the center. I can't really point, so I apologize for that. And what I got here is a 1967 aerial photography image from the area, thanks to Michael Valant, and we're able to actually see where this event took place. And it's overlaid on top of a modern satellite image here, so you can kind of compare. And in this old image, we can actually see the vineyard and the hillcock he was hiding behind. This is a closer up of that image, and we can see that kind of S-shaped road now. There's that house that if you go back, you can kind of see in the bottom middle of the image here. And you can see this vineyard that used to exist. You can see the hillock where he was hiding before he took his smoke break. When he was taking a smoke break, when he heard the sound that alerted him to this object landing. And you can see the vineyard, and kind of a path he cut through to get to where he was standing, where these trace marks were, where this object landed, and this house. And so then what I did next is I took that image of that gendarmerie map, and I kind of rotated it and resized it slightly and overlaid it on top of this aerial photography image that I was provided. And you can see it's a pretty good match, and where they drew these marks is pretty much exactly where this map shows that they were at the time. So this, and here's another kind of image here again, where you can see the vineyard, the hillcock, and the trees. You may notice that where that hillcock is, in the new image, there's actually another hillock there. So there's kind of 2 now, kind of at the intersection of that D6 and Kimen de Marganel. But you can no longer see kind of where that vineyard was or any other defining features. And so it'd be a little bit difficult to figure out on the map unless you had that aerial photography image that we have now. And as we see, in the previous presentation, I showed you guys a different image of this kind of landmark that they had built there. This seems to be the more permanent kind of more stable looking kind of landmark that they had built there. The craft looks like it's a bit more stable and built to last. And they've replaced the kind of green mannequin aliens with a kind of a miniature guy and I guess what's supposed to be a farmer out in the field there. And if you actually look the other and these are images I got off Google kind of Street View. There's limited images from the area, but this is one of them. And this road that kind of goes through it wasn't kind of really there at the time. But if you look in the other direction from here, you can see those hillocks on the other side of the road there, those kind of piles of rubbish and debris that there apparently was only one back in the day, but all these years later, there's now a much longer hillock there. And so it turns out that that landmark they built is actually fairly close to where this event actually happened. I don't think it's exact. Like that dirt road, for example, wasn't there at the time. And as you can see on this overlay here, this road D6A didn't exist at the time. And so that's why it's kind of hard to find on the maps, because this road just wasn't there. They built this road later on, and this road essentially cuts in front of that house and almost right next to where this trace event happened. I think that the actual landmark is kind of still on the other side of that road. There's no like street view to kind of go down that road to get a better look, but it's still fairly close. It's much closer than I thought it was. It's probably if I had to guess, it's maybe a couple 100 feet from where it actually happened. So that should give you an idea of kind of where it took place. Before there's a couple of other things about the case that I didn't mention at the time that are kind of significant, and I had mentioned them in our kind of in the live chat when we re-aired the episode last week. One of the things I didn't really discuss was the kind of the test of the debris in the hole of that they found, and really the only thing that came back on it, sorry for not having this queued up, was that the spot had higher traces of calcium in it. And besides that, everything else was essentially normal. I'm not aware of any other like further tests that were done on it. Everything just seems to imply that they found higher levels of calcium, but that for the most part, things were normal. And I will point out there are many other cases where they found these higher levels of calcium in supposed ground marks or trace left from an unidentified object. What causes these higher levels of calcium? Who knows? But that was one of the things I didn't mention. The other big kind of glaring omission was I kind of failed to address some of the discrepancies in between what he initially told people and the story that eventually came out. He had talked to the gendarmeries, I mentioned, almost immediately within the first couple of days. But it's important to note that during his initial discussion with the gendarmes, most of the more sensational aspects of the story were actually left out. He, for example, when he first reported the story in the initial days after the event, he had reported that only one of the people, one of these occupants entities were on the ground, and one of them was actually inside the craft. He did report that they seemed small, like 8-year-olds, but he essentially downplayed the weirdness of the situation. You may recall me saying that he was aware these were not men that he was dealing with, but in actuality, he pretty much downplayed that fact and presented them as essentially small men or children at the time. The part about being paralyzed and the weapon being pointed at him and him freezing, all that was not added to the story until 6 weeks or so later, on August 18th, I believe, when he went back in for another interview with the gendarmes. So you can ask why did the story change? Why did it turn from basically what was still an unusual encounter, but of just men he saw that got into a thing and flew away, and tell a different story much later on. We know that he supposedly suffered a bit of a nervous wreck from this case. We also know that he was kind of so he was stressed out about this, and we know that he didn't really want to tell the story in the first place. He told the story to his friend, the proprietor of the Cafe de Sports, and he was the one that kind of spread the story around. And so, by all accounts, he wasn't interested in sharing his story, and he basically said 6 weeks later is that he's finally ready to tell the whole story of what really happened. And he didn't tell at the time because he thought people would think he was crazy, that he'd be put away. But for whatever reason, he decided to come out with the full story, in which he elaborated that he was actually, these things had these weapons, they pointed it at him, they paralyzed him, and then they took off, and he was paralyzed for 15 or so minutes. So all those aspects of the story were added later on. So again, take from that what you will. Perhaps again, he was just kind of stressed out and he didn't want to tell a story, and eventually he decided to tell what he knew. But as you recall from my presentation, he was still didn't really want to, after that, talk about his story much, and he did not. Many UFO investigators tried to get him to share more about his encounter and what happened after he got paralyzed, and he just refused to talk to people about it. So he did add that little bit to the story, but I don't think we'll ever know the whole story about that. So that's just some of the main updates on Valensole. I did have some kind of periphery stuff I kind of discovered when I was doing research for this case, about some kind of Native American or Native indigenous legends that relate to little people and pointing weapons. And I had discovered a tale in a book by a Dr. Henry Rink. And Henry Rink was a Danish geologist. He's considered as kind of founding the field of glaciology. He was one of the first people to kind of map the glaciers on Greenland. And when he was doing his kind of field work there, he also had a habit of collecting kind of the indigenous tales and traditions and folklore of the kind of native Inuit and Eskimo that kind of lived in the Greenland kind of area. And he ended up putting out this book, and this book was supposedly published in 1866, but I can't find any copies of it that exist prior to 1875. And he put this book out, Tales and Traditions of the Eskimo, with a sketch of their habits, religion, language, and other peculiarities. And in this book, he tells the story of these Inuarutligkats, and they're kind of a dwarf possessing a shooting weapon with which they are able to kill a creature merely by aiming or pointing at it. And I'll point out how I kind of discovered this story is that I had taken this sketch, which is of the Valensole case, and done a reverse Google image search on it, and actually came up with various cryptid websites using it as the illustrative image of what these Inuarutligkats look like. And so that's actually how I found out about this. And there is quite a bit of a similarity there with these creatures supposedly have this shooting weapon. And he actually elaborates on it later on when he's telling this story of the Inuarutligkats. And basically, there's this, like, I guess there's like a beaver and like a tree or something on the ground, and they take the roots from this tree and they make a weapon. It says not larger in size than a closed fist, shaped like a pistol, and at one end they put a little black stone with a little red one on top of it. This instrument, when finished, they name the pointing weapon. Knowing and fearing its killing powers for their own kith and kin, They are said to have always carried it in their hand. And so this weapon, I mean, to me, it almost kind of sounds like a lightsaber with a kyber crystal. You know, you got to put your rock redstone crystal on it. And anyways, and so they've got this pointing kind of like weapon that they have. And later in the story, they talk about meeting these kind of creatures. And this is the illustration that they give. And these are supposedly, I guess, different than the Inuarutlikat, but they're these kind of entities that they encountered on their adventure or on their trip that they were taking kind of to find, I guess, a new homeland. And these beings, it says, it is told they once met with a singular people whose upper limbs were those of human beings, but below the waist they were shaped like dogs. These creatures were armed with bows and dreadful to behold, and could catch the scent of a man and a beast against the wind like animals. One winter they covered the whole inside of their abode, underground, with a single skin, that of a large beast called a kivlethak, and one with six legs. The story goes that when they had eaten the flesh of this animal, the bones were covered anew with the flesh, but only up to the sixth time. And remember this sixth time thing. And despite its strength and size, they killed it with the above-mentioned instrument by merely pointing at it. They also know how to diminish the distance from one place to another by drawing the various parts of their country closer, and perform this by merely kneeling down together and spreading the arms out towards the mountaintops. But finding some of them too high to spread the arms over, the foremost crossed the already contracted parts with one long stride, the others one by one following in his tracks. Whenever one of them was unfortunate enough to make a false step, several of them were left far behind for a long time. So first want to address this sixth time thing. So not only were these things using this pointing weapon again, and they were able to kill a creature regardless of the size of the creature, apparently. And if you recall in the Valensole case, these entities supposedly had two weapons. They had this smaller one, which they used on him that could paralyze him. And they supposedly even had this larger weapon that he said could take out the whole plateau and could defeat any army. We don't know why he thought that. They didn't use it. But that's apparently what he said. And so this weapon that these dwarf-like creatures use is also able to kill basically any large-sized animal. And apparently they're also able to kind of the flesh regenerates 6 times. And this also kind of comes into the life cycle, because apparently these Inuarutlikats, they live a long time because they can kind of renew their life 5 times, but not more than 6 times, like up to a 6th time. And that's how they kind of, I guess, stay young. And apparently somehow they're able to do it with the animals as well. The other interesting thing about this story is the story about how they're able to kind of travel these long distances almost by contracting and warping like space-time. They grab out and bring the distance closer to you. And unfortunately, some of the times their companions don't make the jump before the contraction fails or the warp bubble collapses, and they get left behind. So I thought that was kind of interesting that they're able to kind of leap from place to place by kind of pulling it closer to you. Another interesting thing about these kind of Inuarutlikats is that they had these different kind of these different outfits that they wore. They had a smaller kind of form fitting for their natural small dwarfish size that they typically wore, but they also carried around with them these larger outfits that were more kind of like human size. And whenever they needed to do like heavy tasks or carry large loads, they would put on these larger human sized clothes. They would beat themselves somehow, I'm not sure how, and they would reach human size and would inhabit these larger clothes, and they would be able to, do this heavy work. And then they could regain their size, get back to their dwarf size by bending down into these kind of caves they lived in the ground. They would hit the crown of their head against the top of the cave, and they would kind of shrink back down to their ordinary size. So it's kind of like almost an Alice in Wonderland, eat the mushroom, grow big, or grow small kind of situation. Only it's done with these clothes and by hitting their head on a cave, apparently. Another story I found interesting a little bit later was in a book by a Charles Leland. And Charles Godfrey Leland, he was this kind of he was an American folklorist who spent time amongst like the Wabanaki Indians in like the Canadian Maritime in the late 19th century, as well as the northeastern U.S., where he collected these legends from the people, and he wrote this book, The Algonquin Legends of New England, or the myths and folklore of the Micmac, the Passamaquoddy, and the Penobscot tribes. And he published this book in 1884. And supposedly he was collecting these legends from like the Passamaquoddy when he was camping in Campobello, New Brunswick, 2 years earlier in 1882. And on the cover of this book, you kind of see this kind of little entity in a suit carrying this kind of sticky-like thingy. And that's actually the Mi'kmaq. And it's kind of like an Indian puck or Robin Goodfellow, kind of a little people of the Micmac. It doesn't particularly to this story though. And in this story, this is a story of Glooskap. And Glooskap is basically kind of this creator, divinity, trickster kind of creature of creation legends of these people. And it's a legend basically about how the white people didn't discover America. Glooskap actually discovered England and France. And he had kind of built this canoe to travel to England and France. And he, met the people and the king. And that's basically how they became aware of America. And so after he went to Europe, then the white people all followed back to North America. And that's how they discovered it. And in this legend of Glooskap and how he went to England, he's masquerading kind of as a small boy. And he meets this Indian woman who had lost kind of her child, and she kind of becomes kind of a adoptive kind of mother kind of in his place. But this is kind of a very strange boy, and this boy had this pipe with him. And these kind of pipes, this pipe could call basically any kind of like animal to him. And these kind of pipes are actually, I guess, common in a lot of folklore of like First Nations and Native American and indigenous people. These kind of like shamans or whatnot that have these pipes that can call animals to them. And so he gives this pipe to the woman and says, "You can have this pipe, but you can't tell anyone about it, or let anyone else have it, or we'll starve." And she asks him kind of, where he gets this pipe. He's like, "Well, I got it from a stranger, And one day this boy is making this kind of like stone canoe that I was telling you about. And the woman takes the pipe and she blows it. Then she calls these animals, deer, beaver. And this beaver that she calls has this stick in his mouth. And when he gives it to her and says, "Whenever you wish to kill anything, though it were a half a mile off, just point this stick at it." And so she did. She pointed it at the deer, and the deer fell dead. And so it's some research I was doing just in the last few days on something called kind of what's called elf shot, or kind of like elf arrows or darts, or thunderbolts. A lot of times when indigenous people, or not indigenous people, but just people, pre-modern people before archaeology would discover things like arrowheads in the ground or stone tools of some kind. They presumed that they were these kind of darts, these invisible darts that these dwarfish or little people could shoot at you. And they were commonly thought to cause harm to animals. They would say like a horse was elf shot, and that would be the cause of its medical conditions. Same would go for people, that they would believe would be affected by these kind of invisible dart weapons that these elves or these dwarf-like little people creatures could shoot at you. And I find it very interesting how people kind of find artifacts, stone artifacts of ancient or indigenous people, and didn't really have a framework to interpret them in, and so kind of came up with these kind of magical religious kind of ideas for these kind of artifacts they found in the ground. But anyways, there's a long history and tradition of these little creatures that kind of either carry these pointing weapons, or they carry these kind of arrows, these invisible arrows or darts that they can kind of shoot people with from afar and bring them down. And Leland in his book just says, this is an old Eskimo tale that's kind of been greatly modernized and altered for the time. The Eskimo believe in kind of sorcerers or spirits who have instruments, which they can merely point at people and kill them. And I actually found, just briefly looking in Mircea Eliade's book, Shamanism, on a section in which he's talking about how people obtain shamanic powers, the sources of power. And he says, in North America, there are also other sources of power for shamans, and likewise other kinds of teachers than souls of the dead and guardian animals. In the Great Basin, we hear of a little green man, only 2 feet tall, who carries a bow and arrows. He lives in the mountains and shoots his arrows into those who speak ill of him. The little green man is the guardian spirit of medicine men, and of those who have become magicians solely by supernatural aid. The idea of a dwarf who grants powers or serves as guardian spirit is extremely widespread west of the Rocky Mountains, and in the tribes of the Plateau Group, the Thompson, Shuswap, etc., and in Northern California, the Shasta, Astawagawai, Northern Maidu, and Yuki. So there's this kind of, again, long tradition of little beings, little creatures that have these kind of magical weapons that they can take down, animals, creatures, entities, people, whatever, from a distance with them. And I found that very interesting. And again, there's a little bit kind of rewriting history going on, because if you look up the Inuarutligkats online, pretty much everything says they're not actually these dwarfs or fairies or little people. They're actually aliens. And so it's kind of been repainted as these are actually just alien beings and creatures now. And in fact, they directly point to the Valensole case in many of these listings talking about the Inuarutligkats. The last, I think, kind of thing I just wanted to end it on is last time I mentioned another case that kind of referred to the object as rugby ball kind of shaped. And this case took place in Nîmes, France in October 14th, 1954. I believe I said last time it was Nice, but it was actually in Nîmes, France. And it's just one of many cases from mid-October 1954, but it's one that specifically used rugby ball in its kind of definition of how it is descriptive of how it was described here. So, and again, this was in the La Provençale, which is the same paper that first interviewed Masse and first put out his story 11 years later. And this is described as a rugby ball on crutches in the sky of Nîmes. After the orange and red gleams accompanied the packs of flying cigars seen by a policeman, 2 other residents of the guard, Mr. Dupois and his wife, saw last night when going back home a few kilometers in the north of Nîmes a greenish gleam in a field. They approached and noted with all the time they needed the presence of an object entirely identical to a rugby ball and appeared to rest on crutches. Suddenly, the strange apparatus rose in the air while emitting a weak noise and gradually taking on an orange color. So, again, this is shares a lot of similarities with the Valensole case. We have a rugby-shaped object resting on crutches in a field. It emits kind of this a noise, or maybe like a whining kind of like sound as it takes off, like we or landed, as you saw in the Valensole case. And so, again, Valensole is a lot of people say it's like one of the best close encounters in Europe, if not like the top close encounter. Just the main problem I have with that is that it's not particularly unique. It's it's another single witness case that shares many similarities with countless cases before it, even from this very region of France. And And Nemes is not right next to Valensole. It's about 100 miles, 100 kilometers to the west, I believe, west. But it's close enough. And this is the same kind of regional paper that covered the story. So there's so many of these cases to look at. I'm not sure I would say Valensole is the best or most interesting. There's no evidence for it. Like we don't have the soil samples, which didn't really show anything. We barely have any interviews with the guy. He was pretty. He avoided talking to people about the case. So it's an interesting case. It's a fun case, but I don't think it rises above many of the other kind of cases that are similar to it. And that's my update. Thank you for tuning in. I will catch you guys next week. Next presentation, I'll be talking about the Alvin Morse sample and the famous, infamous Wilbert Smith piece of UFO debris that was allegedly shot off a UFO in July 1952 that Wilbert Smith talked about. But it turns out they're actually the same case. This case with the UFO that shot down a piece of debris over Virginia never actually happened. It was a distortion of the Alvin Moore case. And so be sure to tune in for that not the 21st, not this coming Sunday, but the following Sunday for you guys to learn about that case and why they're actually the same case and why it's not even a UFO case, because there was no UFO. All right. Thank you very much. Anyway, that's kind of all I had.
Yeah, it's the Men in Black.
That's right. They're trying to shut us down.
Well, I didn't really have anything to add to my story from last time, just because I kind of wanted to take a break before going all in on the prairie light rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But there is a bunch more material about that. I don't know specifically if there's. I do want to find out more about the Sand Creek reports from 1913, but like just from the clippings at kufos.org, which I think are those George Eberhard's clippings. I'm not sure, but anyway, there's a bunch of other reports like that from the same time period from Kansas.
Yeah.
In the 1910s. So yeah, it's something I definitely want to learn more about.
Well, with it cutting out, maybe that's about all we can do today.
Maybe, yeah, I feel like I made some sort of error probably, but I don't remember what it was. I should also mention that Luis has a PhD, so I accidentally referred to him as Mr. Luis Cayetano. I wasn't doing that as a slight against him or anything like that. It was just an error. I should have said Dr. Luis Cayetano.
Is that what he prefers?
I don't know.
Just because you have a PhD, most people don't use doctor in front of their name.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. Is that rude to call a doctor Mr. or something? I don't know.
According to UFO Wiki, Pierce, like people typically put the PhD part in the actual source reference. That's just style guidelines. Like, but UFO Twitter got mad. Like they're trying to take away Gary Nolan's PhDs and make him seem like he's not a qualified. It's like, no, that's just how. Like, I know you guys have never actually like written papers before or like know what a source is, but that's just how you write a source out, guys. Like, you don't put all those the flattery formal titles like in the source. Like, that's just how it is. And yeah. So, anyway.
Okay. Yeah, that's the only thing that's coming to my mind. I also meant instead of it wasn't Crawfordshire, it was Crawfordsville, Indiana.
Yeah. Yeah.
those sightings or those reports from 1891 came from.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think maybe we should just end the show early tonight. As much as I would love to just go on and on about the OSAP ATIP thing, no. I actually do want to read that more closely, but I have not had the chance to. I'm really I skimmed through it and I did find it really interesting, and I want to spend more time with it, but it's going to take me a while to really absorb all of that information, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. All right, sounds good. Well,
yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
We won't have an episode next week because next week's my birthday, so we're postponing it. So it'll be 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Yeah, and also, this was never actually explicitly stated on the show, but I don't think it was anyway. But Jeff's dog Dorothy passed away, and just after last week's show. Not just right after, but like the following day. So.
Yep, she got sick. Started getting sick shortly before the episode. All right, the Men in Black are shutting us down. They're trying to silence us.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I just wanted to offer my condolences.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for all the kind words. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And okay, for our final story tonight, a red sprite was shot on camera from space. Here's a shot of a red sprite taken by Matthew Dominic from the International Space Station on June 3rd. The red sprite is visible as a series of red streaks above the bright blue light, which is actually a lightning storm off the coast of South Africa. Red sprites are a type of temporary luminous event, a massive plasma discharge that occurs in the upper atmosphere. Before we go, if you enjoyed this show, we would like you to please consider subscribing to our channel, Ufo Sunset. Please also hit the like button and hit the notification bell icon if you'd like to get notified about upcoming videos. And come and join our cozy and intimate live chat. A great plus for joining the live chat is that you can give us constructive feedback live on the air, especially if we make any factual errors. You can also join our Discord, a temporary link to which will be found in the episode description as soon as I add it after the show. Now, here at UFOs, our political and personal views are not the same, and the work of each of us is independent work. Personal views or positions expressed in individual pieces are not those of UFOs, who is not a person and has no views, or the other hosts. Please be sure to check out our respective content. I can be found at the Earth YouTube channel. Visit Luis Cayetano's website, ufologyiscorrupt.com, and you can find Jeff Knox's daily posts on history and the science of UFOs on Twitter or Facebook. Jeff Knox spends all of his time studying UFOs, and he makes almost no money off of it. Please consider visiting his Patreon page and becoming his patron. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Luis. We're sorry that you couldn't make it this week. Yeah. Also, thank you to Swink McLeod. Yes, plasma is cool. That's a very important fact that everyone needs to know. And in the words of the disc,
is it cool or... All right.
Okay, you're back now. After everything that you said, whatever it was, you're back.
Censorship. Censored.
It's those MIB.
Yeah. All right, guys.
In the words of the disc, they're always there, but you can never see them.